call to order the meeting of the Iowa City City Council Economic Development Committee. Welcome, everyone. First item on our agenda is to consider approval of the minutes from the October 19th, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes or any changes?
I'll move to accept.
Okay.
And I'll second it.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the minutes are approved. And Wendy, I'll pass it over to you.
Okay. Well, as you recall, last month we were here to listen to the request for continued funding from several of our arts organizations in Iowa City. And today we are going to hear from a couple of our economic development organizations, those who support small business development and even not so small business sometimes. We have Tracy John Sargent with the Multicultural Development Center of Iowa here, and also Kurt Nelson with the Entrepreneurial Development Center, Inc. of Cedar Rapids here. And we'll have Tracy John go first, I think. And I'll just give a little preface by saying that we have been working with Tracy John for a couple of years on supporting him and his endeavor to provide BIPOC startup business incubation. He's been working with a few cohorts over the last couple of years and graduating folks out of his program into business ownership in the best case. And he does a number of other things as well to support small business development. So we have supported his endeavors at $25,000 each for the last two previous fiscal years. We did that using economic development opportunity funds, but we wanted to get him and this request into the community development line of economic development funds. So that is why we've invited him here today, and to get into this format of providing a little annual report or information on what he's been up to over the last year, progress report that goes along with the request for continued funding. And likewise with Kurt Nelson with the EDC Inc. in Cedar Rapids. We've been supporting EDC Inc. I think for about 10 years now, maybe not quite 10,
Yes, I think
eight or 10.
It's like 25,000, or almost a year for like 206,000, I think is your number. So.
Okay, well, you know that better than I do off the top of your head. Anyway, Kurt will do the same, give a report on what his org's been up to and how that relates to Iowa City businesses, as he is rooted in Cedar Rapids, but certainly works throughout the corridor. So I think with that, I will turn it over to Tracy John first to talk about MCDI and Incubate.
Thank you. Appreciate that. So obviously this is my first time in this forum, so if I seem a little clunky, it's for a lack of experience. Did everyone receive the impact report?
Yeah, it was in the
Okay, perfect.
memo.
So, you know, I try to keep it pretty basic. I'm not a super fancy guy. We have received support, which of course we appreciate. Really, this program wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the initial support that we received from the city. Jeff Fruin and I have had several conversations over the last few years about the need for a program like this that focuses on our historically disadvantaged, underestimated, underserved parts of our community that have aspirations of being a small business owner or are current small business owners that could use some support to help accelerate that growth. And that is what ultimately became what I call Incubate. It is our BIPOC Business Accelerator Program. So it's a 16-week program that we provide. Due to the pandemic, it has been 100% virtual, which certainly has allowed us to provide, I think, more support than we would have if it was in person. You might notice some of the stats that I provided in the statistics and major milestones. You know, 31 businesses that we've supported. If you compare that to other things in the community, it might not seem that impressive, but when you take into account the amount of one-on-one support, the attention, the technical assistance, a lot of the things that we provide those businesses, I'm surprised that we're actually able to support that many businesses. The support does not line up with the individual cohorts. So at the end of the 16 weeks, we're not done supporting them. It tends to be ongoing. So we're going to have a problem of having expenses that, compound as we continue to provide some of that support, and then look for strategic opportunities to wean people off of that support when their business models obviously support that. We're very proud of the fact that it is focused on BIPOC-owned businesses. We certainly try to make sure that we're not excluding anyone. We try to be as inclusive as possible, but I think most people understand what our target demographics are, and to date, we have not had to turn anyone away because they didn't meet our target demographics. I don't know that we would actually do that, but 100% of the people that participate in our programs identify as a person of color, which we think is obviously fantastic. There are a couple of milestones that I wanted to call your attention to. We recognize, as we did our own inclusive economic development survey, even though it was somewhat unofficial, a lot of the feedback that we received from business owners was the challenges that they had in receiving funding. Debt financing is continuing to be a challenge. Redlining still exists, and so our solution to that problem was to create a microloan and small dollar loan program. And so we received some assistance to help generate the loan loss reserve, which allows us to have some exclusivity. We are the Iowa Community Capital affiliate for Johnson County. So they are, I think, the largest lending CDFI in the state. So we are the Johnson County affiliate, allows us to provide small dollar loans up to $2,500 and then microloans up to $50,000. We tried to put a caveat, or at least have some checks and balances in place, and so really the requirement for people to participate in that loan program is that they've gone through our business accelerator. We've been a little bit flexible on that, as we want to obviously support as many people as we can, but there's a risk factor. If somebody defaults on the loan, that obviously impacts our loan loss reserve. So we want to try to balance that, and an easy way for us to do that is to have them go through our program, because we have a lot more detailed information on who they are, what plans they have in place. We, in most cases, with our business coach, help them actually create a business plan, which unfortunately most small businesses do not have. And then they go to the bank and ask for loans, and the bank turns them away and says, you need this documentation. And more often than not, they have nowhere to go, or they're not sure where to go to get that kind of support. So it's very easy for us to kind of make that part of the loan requirement. We provide a lot of technical assistance. I think most of the funds that we receive end up going right back out to small organizations. We've provided computer equipment, marketing, which could be in the form of web design, domain names, email addresses, a lot of services that help them provide more of a virtual platform. We've designed dozens of websites to help these small businesses have an online platform. So a lot of what we do in funds that we receive goes right back out in terms of technical assistance. Like Wendy mentioned earlier, we're about halfway through our third cohort, so this is our second year of providing that program. But throughout the last 2 years, we've had what I think are some fairly significant milestones. We've established some partnerships, most, I think, importantly, with ICAD. They have a Builders and Backers program, which is a great little pipeline for our program. So if you're not familiar with that program, it's an opportunity for people to kind of exercise their business idea. Is there really a need for something like that? And they go through their own program, and they have their own cohort. And essentially, after that, they kind of prove or maybe disprove whether there's a need for that. And so some of those people that have come out of that program have gone right into our BIPOC Accelerator, which allows us an opportunity to further work with them, develop their business model, help identify some of the gaps that they might have, whether that's in form of legal services or marketing, or just needing some, more work to put in the development so that they can experience the kind of growth that we hope all businesses see. The financial summary, I think, is obviously worth noting. It might be somewhat misleading when you see where our funding is coming from. We had an unexpected private donor that made a significant donation. That is not something that we have experienced in the 5 years that I've been doing this. So I wanted to make sure that I level set some expectations that is not a thing that we expect. We're in the middle of Giving Tuesday, and I can tell you that it's pretty sparse out there. There's not a ton of donations coming through, so it continues to be a challenge for us to create a private donor base. So we continue to be at the mercy of whatever public funds are available. We look at all grant opportunities, but it's tight. It's pretty competitive out there, and there's certainly a lot of great organizations that are doing really important work. I think we're just one of them, and we're a relative newcomer. I like to consider us an emerging organization. I stay away from the use of the word startup when I refer to us. So, I think it's important to note that, the city of Iowa City is the second largest contributor and financial supporter of our programs. And then we have some other partnerships, mostly in the corporate sector, Green State Credit Union, Target Corporation, and Hills Bank, kind of round out the list of our top financial supporters. I provided a list of participants. Sometimes it's nice to put some names with, the program. All of them are local. Almost all of them are based out of Iowa City, certainly all within Johnson County. So we do, I think, a very good job of trying to make sure, and we're very mindful of where public funds go. And I'm proud to say that any funds that came from Iowa City went to support Iowa City businesses. We leverage other public funds and corporate resources to support businesses and entrepreneurs that are outside of our Iowa City footprint, which of course creates a bit of a accounting nightmare, and that's why my CPA is not a super big fan of mine, but I think it's important so that we can always pass the red face test and speak to where did the funds actually go, how were they supported. So I've got this fairly elaborate spreadsheet that documents all of that. The current state of the program, I'm feeling really good about where we're at. This is a great cohort. We had a few people that joined the program late, thanks to Wendy making some introductions and us continuing to socialize the program with our alumni. But we've got a strong group of people that are in the program right now. Like I said, we're about 60% through that program. We're already starting to see some improvements in their business models. We've been working with one in particular quite a bit to help them accelerate the opening of their location here in Iowa City, which is DeFlavia Unit. So we've been providing them a lot of support, both financially and in any other way that we possibly can. So a lot of exciting things that I expect to come out of this particular cohort. I think that's relatively up to date. And then lastly, just kind of calling out our program sponsors, just to make sure that everyone understands that it really does take a village to make some of these things happen. And we, do our best to leverage our network. And we have certainly people in the room that have made their network and connections available so that we can try to make our case that it's a program that they should support. That really is the bulk of the update that I wanted to provide. I'm certainly open to any questions that anyone might have. Appreciate John being so attentive. You were right there the whole time, hanging on every word, so thank you.
I'm actually just curious, how big is your team that's doing this, or is your team you?
Well, as of right now, my team is me. This is one of the ongoing challenges of being a small nonprofit and not being in that grant cycle. It's where we run on volunteer power, and as the world changes and people, pull back, we are the ones that tend to suffer from that. So, I fortunately have a very flexible employer. I have a full-time job, as many of you know, and I do this as my second full-time job, which allows me a lot of flexibility, and I can, have meetings and do things. The goal, obviously, looking forward would be to leverage some public funds, maybe ARPA, to be able to actually provide some paid positions and be able to scale what we do. I'm painfully aware that we have probably disappointed a number of people that we attempted to support but couldn't follow through, because ultimately it falls on me most of the time. So it's a little exhausting. If I look tired most of the time, that's why. But we're certainly working towards addressing and improving that. Actually, I do need to qualify that statement. We do have a business coach, so technically there is an additional person. Part of our partnership with Iowa Community Capital provided a fund that allowed us to have a business coach, and they pay half and we pay half of that. And we have an individual that I think does a fantastic job working with those businesses. She's engaged with a few of them right now to help them develop those business plans so that they can make some improvements. One of them is trying to get some trademark licensing with the university so that they can provide apparel with the University of Iowa on that. So it's another great opportunity to, kind of showcase the growth that comes out of something like this that requires that ongoing support. So it's me plus that halftime resource.
Thanks for the detail. I mean, I'm sort of focused on it because unlike my son and my father, who were business people, I'm not. So it's just interesting to hear the detail and all the effort, all the aspects of what goes into business development. I think of myself as more of maybe a social entrepreneur trying to build community.
Sure.
But I really appreciate trying to learn what goes into business entrepreneurship.
There's definitely a lot of behind-the-scenes things. I, as a technologist, try to leverage technology whenever I can, and so we developed a mentoring platform because it just wasn't feasible to manually do that, and so we built our own platform that facilitates mentoring, so that's another way that we provide support. I can't imagine doing that and providing that level of support without having those types of tools, which is obviously another expense. It's something that I've been, kind of covering out of my own personal pocket, but eventually we'd like to make that available to the community, have it be kind of self-funded and self-managed, and then find ways to leverage, public funds to pay for that because it lives in the cloud, so.
Other questions for Tracy? Oh, yeah, go ahead, Kurt.
Well, so you'll hear from me in a minute, right? But, so this is our 20th year with our organization in the state. We focus on a completely different group of entrepreneurs, interstate commerce, not Main Street kind of things. And, I would say if there's, you have significant experience in what it takes to actually be effective working with entrepreneurs and a lot of resources. And so if there's ever anything you need from us, you should just ask. Sure. Because there's a lot of experience and talent that's we've had wrapped around. We'd be happy to just offer it up to you if you are interested. So. And yes, you need to raise more money because you need to do it full time because it takes full time.
Yep. Yeah. Thank you for that, Kurt. And I'm very familiar with the program just on a volunteer basis. I've presented to each of the cohorts and offered free legal services as an individual. So really appreciate the work that's being done and, can see that it is really impacting, those folks who are getting the guidance along the way. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
Yeah. So.
And you could, I don't know if we talked about this ahead of time, you could vote on making a recommendation to the full council to support the orgs as we have noted in the memo, one at a time, or could do them both after the presentations.
Preference?
I think we could combine them personally.
Sure.
Yes, we're good with both.
Yeah, right, I know it.
Yeah, better chance of that if we do them both. I don't know. All right. Anything else for Tracy then? Thank you for your presentation. Well, Kurt, we'll pass it over to you.
Yeah, I think one of the things to think about that I understood when I started this, and I founded this in 2003, right? So this is our 20th year, which is pretty interesting. And the thing that I'll pass this on mostly to you, right, is that when you start to help entrepreneurs, the thing that you think, so I had been a successful entrepreneur in my life, and I'd turned 50, and I'd had an excellent exit with the company I owned part of, and what was I going to do with myself, and what could I do that I didn't involve airports and hotels? And so that's how this got founded, right? But what I thought when I started was that I could take all of that experience and success and knowledge and just simply impart it on the entrepreneurs, and they would take it up and they would use it, right? And boy, was I wrong when it came to that. And that really kind of became the secret sauce of what what EDC does, right? Because what we learned early on was you can't give people advice and expect that they're going to take it. Everyone that dies from lung cancer still smoking, you got advice to stop, right? The trick is to get them to stop smoking, right? That's the hard work, and that's the roll up your sleeves, get involved, build trust, build faith, right? And really help people succeed, and measure yourself by their success, not measure yourself by hours engaged or activities provided or events run, right? And so since the beginning, after the first couple of years when we sorted that out, we realized that's what we had to do with this model, right? So we had to figure out if every year we're going to sit and our team is going to look and say, well, beginning of the year, strategic planning, we said this company was going to grow from here to here, and this one was going to grow from here to here. Did they do it? And we're accountable, right? Because I can't say, well, now they just didn't listen, because you all didn't give me money for them not to listen. You all gave me money for them to listen and do, right, and create economic improvement, right? And so that's a little unique to how we look at our organization versus a lot of other organizations. So, I tend to, and you already see in what I've sent you, I tend to report out on hard economic stats, right, rather than events and activities and things like that. Not that those aren't all important, it's just that what's really important is your vitality improving in your community? Are you going to have safer parks and better streets and all the things that you want to have, right? So I provided you with our 2021 stakeholder report and another copy of the letter that Wendy sent to you earlier. We've now worked with about more than 1,300 businesses. We work statewide, although primarily we work where our investors invest in us to be, right? So that's pretty much the eastern Iowa or this corridor. There's about 120 some investors that fund our organization, and you can see them. All their logos are on our report. You're welcome to that as well. Know that every single logo on there is willing to support entrepreneurs, by the way. And so, in 19 years collectively, as we measure this organization, the capital raised by the companies that we've helped grow is right now at the end of last year was at $809 million. So getting pretty close to $1 billion. And that's capital raised and employed and deployed mostly in the state, but not all in the state, because we have some that are deployed in other states as well. Increased revenue with the companies since we've touched them, almost, $2.6 billion now, right? So that's getting to be a pretty significant number. New jobs is about 3,300. The average wage now has been increasing, and the average wage now is up to about $73,000, which is above the corridor's average. So the jobs that are getting created by these companies are on the upper scale side. I'm going to chat about Viewpoint here to come up in a minute, but I think, if you look at increased payroll, $768 million of payroll from all those new jobs and raises and everything so those are the metrics that are the dollars that can get spent in your communities, right? And I'll touch on just Iowa City in a second. We've raised or generated ourselves about $15.5 million over 19 years to fund our organization, fund the full-time staff and everything that we've done. Half of that funding comes from private supporters. So all the private, like Alliant Energy, if you will, and you see all their logos on there, all the private supporters. About 20% from our own operational earnings, so we charge for some things we do. So when we do work for Bazooka Farm Star in Washington, Iowa, as an example, and we've helped them grow from about 9 million to about 36 million and double their employment and everything, and this is great for Washington and Washington County. But they're a profitable company, so we don't use anybody's donor money to help them. They just pay, right? And that also helps us offset, right? So we don't have to go out and raise all of our budget, right? We can earn some of our budget. 28% comes from some form of public funding, which is including you, right, on a regular basis. So, the return on it's about $270 to 1 at this point, relative to economic return, which has been excellent. I think, you guys invest in us for Iowa City, not the state, so I'll kind of focus on that a bit. we are very focused on high-impact, scalable interstate commerce businesses, right? We've stayed razor-focused on that since the beginning so that we can be very good at what we do and not get pulled left or right. They are the businesses that bring new people and new money to the state of Iowa, right? You have vibrant Main Street. You get vibrant main streets in communities that have vibrant interstate commerce, bringing enough money and enough employees to use the Main Street businesses. And I think, we've stayed focused on the interstate commerce side, the businesses that really create the fuel to grow communities. Startups, early stage and later stage businesses, so only about a third of our resources over the years have gone towards startups. About a third to early stage businesses in their first 5 years, really, and then about a third for businesses up to 100 years old. Because, from economic vitality, if we help the Bazooka Farm Star grow from 9 to 36 million over 5 years, the economic impact from that is significant, right? More significant than helping a startup entrepreneur create a phone app, right? And if you're investing in economic development, you want to see that, then for us, we have to spread out our resources to make sure we're working on the right things to truly create the right end results. Debbie Durham is really focused on this with me every year. She's a big supporter, and I know her really well. And so we go through these numbers every year, but that's what the state wants to see. They want to see the bottom line economic numbers. So, in your community, I always say this to communities, if you have companies like the Bazooka Farm Stars of the world in the manufacturing space or software space or whatever that have been around a long time but could use help, and they're interstate commerce, then they're somebody we could get introduced to. So when you think about us, just don't think about us as startups, right? There's a lot of startup organizations that are out there, and we work collaboratively with all of them, but it's not what our main focus is. I think that I'm going to just highlight a couple businesses you might find these interesting tonight, right? Because Viewpoint Molecular, and I don't know if you've heard much about it, right? But Viewpoint Molecular is a U of I spin-out, right? It's a radiopharmaceutical company focused on the treatment of hard-to-cure cancers, right? The first two are the metastatic melanoma and neuroendocrine tumors, right? Technology is kind of funny because when I started working with them, it took me like months to figure out what I'm about to tell you in 2 sentences, because I was talking to scientists, but really it's about the technologies around creating a cage that will safely encase a radioisotope or a nuclear particle, and the cage has a protein bonding component to it that will find the protein of the cancer, so you can have it match up so that when it goes through your body, it will only bond to the cancer, and then once it bonds to the cancer, it just can release the isotope and kill the cancer, and then it washes out of your system in the same day. So no need for radiation, no need for any, right? And you can run that cage through the body without the isotope first, right? With just an imaging agent in it to make sure the systems will work with it, because it's probably effective, they're guessing, on 70% of people. So you don't have to try it like you do with chemotherapy, right? This you can run through with no risk at all, and if it's going to work for you, it'll bond everywhere the cancer is in your body, and it'll light it right up on a scanner, and if you know it does that, then you know you can send the nuclear particles through and kill it. At the lab mice stage, they've gotten to the point where with immunotherapy added to it, they've gotten 10 out of 10 full cures of metastatic melanoma, and that is a killer disease, metastatic melanoma. That's a less than 6-year lifespan once you've been diagnosed. And so really important stuff. These folks, they both got drafted here by the university. They were a married couple. This was the one university that would let them both come here and both go to work together. And so Fran Johnson, she's a nationally known cardiologist and transplant specialist, and Michael is Schultz, her husband, he's a global key opinion leader in the area of nuclear medicine. And we met them both in 2009, just after they'd formed the company, and started working with them a little bit. But about 2016, that's when they were going to really have to now take it out of the lab. Now, you know a lot about academics starting businesses, right? But to go from academic to the street is a big transition, and one that's very difficult, right? Because the whole mindset, if you were SBIR funded, however you were going, this is not what the street's going to talk to you about. It's not, you're not going to get investors. I don't know how many times I was just with another academic in the medical area yesterday, and, well, no one will fund me. Well, it's because you're speaking in this language instead of this language, right? And so then we dug in, right, at that point in time with them to say, okay, so you're out going to raise money now. You in the pharma business, it's 10 years and $100 million per asset is typically what you have to raise and how long it takes to get through the FDA process. So this is, and they've got 2 assets, right? So they're going to have to raise $200 or $300 million over the next 3 or 4 years. And so getting them started, that's when I engaged, right? So over the next 5 years, I'm currently the chairman of their board, but I engaged as their CEO, their CFO, and their marketing director as well. I put over 1,300 hands-on hours in that business because I created all the financial pro formas, all the tools, and everything necessary to go out and raise the money and help them understand the language to be able to talk up to the money. And with that, they were able to raise a seed raise for just under $1 million. And in 2020, while the years to do a Series A raise, we went out and raised $14 million that year. They've matched it with over $18 million in SBIR grants, so roughly $32 million has been raised and generated so far. Right now, the merger's been approved by the boards for them to merge with IsoRay out of Richland, Washington. Now, they have offices out here on Mormon Trek and at the BioVentures Center, Viewpoint does, right? When if this merger goes through, and it's right up to shareholder vote right now, it's going to give them about $50 million from an expansion standpoint, which they're buying a building here now, although I believe it's out in Coralville, because the one that's already approved for nuclear manufacturing it. They're going to invest another $20 million in it. And they're going to create a nuclear isotope manufacturing facility here in Johnson County. And that'll be one of a kind in the country. And that will be for serving all of the hospitals in the Midwest, right? And then there'll have to be another one built on the West Coast and another one built on the East Coast. Then they'll have to you got to hire about 60 people between $50,000 and $500,000 a year salaries. So the average is going to be over 200. And they're all going to come to your community one side or the other, right? And so I think, this is one that Fran was with me the other day, and I was talking to her, and being her board chair and getting it to this point, it's really clear, and they'll tell you this. It wouldn't still be here if we weren't here. Because if we were not here doing the work we did, the money would have pulled them to the coasts. Because these kind of startups happen on the East Coast in the Boston area, the West Coast in the San Diego area, but they don't happen in Iowa. And you don't end up with a manufacturing facility in Iowa unless you can bring them the talent in Iowa. So this is just an example, right, of something that's going to be great for your community down here, and something that we were very instrumental in. And then I've talked with you about Pear Deck last year, but you all know Riley and Michaeline and Lynch, right? Well, so they'll tell you the same. What ended up happening with them is, they just made a real gracious donation to our organization. But I think that because they know we were totally involved. I ran their sales force for 1.5 years, hired their sales team, trained the sales manager, put the in place. So this is stuff, and they paid for that out of their venture capital. But they're a great couple. So now they had this fantastic exit at the end of 2020. You may have read about it, right? So, you had about $100 million come back to this community, to the investors and founders in that exit. And if you haven't seen it from them already, they've already created a foundation. They're going to invest every dollar they've got, which is significant, in making Johnson County the best place to live. They bought a building for one of your private schools and put them in it because they had a lease problem. Right? They created this other foundation. They're trying to figure out how to work on local grown foods, sustainability. So I think you're going to see them pour millions of dollars back into your community over the next decade because they're absolutely focused on it. And they could be helping you too, by the way.
They do.
Yeah. They do, yeah. I was going to say, yeah. Right? Riley's on my board, and I just love, and Michael as well. But I mean, I think these are examples of what happens, right, when you help people scale and create real wealth, right, and you give it to people who are not buying new cars and houses and yachts, right, but that are really committed to their community. So you'll never give enough to us to give back, to even come close to what they're about to do for your community, which is, I think, just that just speaks to the kind of people that they are, which is great. So those are, to us, those are prime examples of the kind of thing that we do and the kind of thing that we're focused on, right? I think, when it comes to Iowa City in 2021, I gave you the stats on your sheet. 5.5 million people raised in the businesses we helped in your community, right? It's a 55-45 split, private, public, 76-24 over time. New revenue over 3 million, new jobs 21,427 over time, average wage 73.8, and that was driven by Viewpoint, because Viewpoint added a lot of folks at some pretty big high salaries. Increased payroll 5.7, new businesses started and so forth. So you're clearly getting a good return on the investment, right? Because a lot of other folks are investing and your dollars are getting matched by a lot of other people, right? Because, we spend a lot more resources here than your $25,000. And I think that's great that everybody's a part of this team. So overall, I would say, this is our 20th year. I think you'll see a little bit more marketing from us relative to kind of what's gone on in 20 years. We kind of keep a low profile. We're not out in the media a lot. But you all know Beth Meyer, because Beth was with the partnership down there, right? But Beth is now our new VP of Marketing. So Beth is going to be doing an awful lot of that work and educating folks over the next year and we'll have some kind of 20th year event next fall, which I'm sure you'll all be invited to. So I'll shut up now and ask if you have any questions, and thank you again for your continued support.
Thank you, Kurt.
Questions? Observations?
Just again, thank you for your presentation, and I do always appreciate the stories because, again, I'm not a business guy, so it's always nice to hear about individuals in their business. And I can remember meeting the folks behind Pear Deck at the ICAD when I was on ICAD, and they were a different, they, at least from my perspective, I didn't view them in the same way as I viewed a lot of the people who attend those meetings. They did seem to have a different way about them, and so it's kind of interesting hearing about they've taken their business success and they're now reinvesting or investing in the community, which kind of speaks to
They weren't
their vision.
It's rare that I even see that in what I do, right, over the years, right? Because people get to be about the wealth part of it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't why they did what they did. And I think they ended up, because of COVID, that year, their product helped connect teachers and students in the classroom in a much more a beneficial manner using, in a partnership with Google's Chromebook, right? But as soon as the fun story was that, as soon as COVID hit and they closed the schools, Riley called me and said, okay, you're in charge of sales now. What do you do? All your clients just close their doors. Right? How are you going to sell it? Right? So then it was, this is when you're going to have to get creative. So think about what you can do. Right? Well, what they did was they just opened the product up free for any teacher in the world to use it for the rest of the semester. 400,000 teachers signed up. Well, they went from 30 to 90 employees in about 60 days. And it was a mess, because no matter how fast you can hire, you can't onboard people that fast. And so, but their revenue went up 4x in 6 months. And then an acquisition thing just came hunting and put a number in front of their board. They were venture capital funded, so they didn't have total control over that. But put a number in front of the board they couldn't pass up, and there they go. But I think if you were to ask them now, I'm not sure they would have sold it, because they really did it for the teachers and the students. They didn't really do it for the money. So
I don't have a question per se, but I'm just appreciate the depth of your explanations and where this is coming from and the degree to which you've built this up over 20 years. And I'm really, my mind is, with the two entities sitting here at the table, one of the things I'm really struck by is the number of different, partners that you have that, the relationships that are built up over time. And so I think it's fantastic that you sort of reached out, because it seems to me that that's honestly for the groups that you're trying to serve and to help them historically and currently, those relationships are not necessarily available or first of mind,
It takes
right?
a long time to
So-
develop them.
So to be able to have that kind of tapping in so that everyone can be at the table and that kind of knowledge and growth and those relationships, because relationships beget money,
Well,
right?
I mean,
So
we've
I just think it's
we've got
fantastic that there's
Over 50
this.
subject matter experts that we kind of align ourselves with now over the years. And I mean, I had Geb Thomas from the university, one of the teachers. He's got a number of startups, right? But this is one that's coming out of the university for a product, it's an air quality measurement system that's being sold to the Air Force. But I mean, today, he needed, where would I go for somebody to give us electrical engineering advice? So I gave him that. Where would I go for a mechanical engineer? So I gave him that. Where would I go for the right IP attorney? So I asked him a few questions. I gave him that. Right. So in the course of a 1 hour, he got all the connections he needed to move forward, and he was like, holy crap.
Yeah.
I mean, you had everything that I asked for. I said, well, I didn't when we started this, but this is year 20 now.
And to be able to leverage that within the community, I think is incredibly strong, and to be able to have more people at the table, have more access to those kind of SMEs, and I think it's fantastic to see sort of the possibilities that are starting to crop up with entrepreneurship incubators, along with something that's established, and that there are so many resources and experts to be able to
Yeah, we're willing to
share that. Yeah.
whatever you want, so there's not a competition.
Right.
There's plenty of entrepreneurs.
Yeah,
Question?
go ahead.
Can you, I think it might be helpful to clarify, the public funds and presuming some of the private funds that you get, how much of those go towards the administration of the organization, the EDC itself? Is that 100%, or do some of those funds get passed on to businesses?
No, 100% is our operating budget, right, which is, just shy of, depending on the year, $900,000, right, for all the things that we do and the people that we have, right? But years ago, I set up a separate organization to raise investment funds, and that's totally separate, but it has an agreement, a contract with EDC relative to conflict of interest and all of that, right? And then I raised and invested 2 different funds. We were actually invested in Pear Deck, which was a good thing, but, and I am also the co-founder and current chair of the Iowa Venture Capital Association, so we did organize that in 2015, which was to put together a better statewide organization to really know where all the money is on the venture capital side. And so we have 2 meetings a year and manage that as well. But all of the operating money is straight inside the organization. I've got a 25-person board and an audit committee and.
Thank you. Kurt, so I was a little glad to hear you say you're not really marketing yourselves or out there, because I'll be honest, I knew very, very little about your organization before yesterday when we got the packet. And so I started asking people, and including one of your board members, Riley, who we've talked about. But I'm grateful to learn everything that you're doing. And one of the things that came to my mind, so I'll just pose this question to you, in this organization that's been around now for almost 20 years and, operating as you do in the space that you need to, but not necessarily kind of, out more broadly in the public. The Iowa City Council is finishing up a strategic planning process where we're to implement or to adopt our 5-year strategic plan. And we have kind of these 3, what I'd call value lenses. And so I'm trying to think holistically, even though this is relatively small dollars, right? But trying to think holistically through those lenses, which are racial equity and social justice kind of as one, partnerships and engagement as another, and climate action as another. So in the tenure of your time with EDC, can you just speak to, has your focus changed in relation to those kinds of areas, or what are you doing in relation to those?
Now, we kind of get asked about those things over the years. I mean, everything, I've gotten asked over the last 2 or 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And prior to that was climate, and so forth. And, what we've said is that, our focus, right, is helping create the kind of businesses that create the kind of economic vitality that allows the state to do more of those things, that allows communities to do more of those things, that allows the ability for those things to happen. And if we stay focused on what we're supposed to be doing, then you'll have a lot more funding for that to occur. But if we shift off, right, and start to become more focused on other things, the economic vitality component will suffer. Right? So we've stayed razor focused on really creating the ability for you to have greater tax dollars to invest in however you choose. But we've tried to stay out of, I said when it comes to entrepreneurs, when they walk through the door, they walk through the door. We don't see color, we don't see religion, we don't see gender, we don't, right? We just see the viability of the opportunity. Now, I can tell you it's 36% underserved out of our 1,300, and that is because we measure it. But I don't generally like to do that, because I just like to stay focused on the success of whatever entrepreneur's in front of me at the time. I don't know if that helps answer your question.
Yeah, and I think I'd, just challenge you a little bit to see how in existing organizations, we know that when we look at our community and what is representative in our community, it's changing and it's shifting, and that, the relationship building that you're talking about is so much just who knows who knows who knows who. So I hope that continues to expand and, open the doors to more and more people
Well,
who
it
maybe.
should. I mean, it's worked very well to date, and the reason you don't see a lot or hear a lot about us is that we have tended over time to make it all about the entrepreneurs. So you get to hear about them. It's not about us. It might have been about me when I was younger and I was growing and I wanted to be in the paper. But when it came to this, I never wanted it to be about us. I wanted it to be about them. My marketing people have always said, but you keep make it a little bit more about us. And I say, so I think this year you'll see more about us. But because of word of mouth and our own brand, we're not short of work to do on any given day.
Sure.
People could double fund us. I could double the staff and we'd still be buried. There's more work to do than we have the resources to do. So it's not like we're trying to go out and
Not
find
looking for
more
business.
work,
Yeah, I
right?
get you.
It's really more PR, and if I'm going to choose between investing dollars in PR or helping an entrepreneur, I always choose the entrepreneur. So that's kind of why we're kind of a little bit of a secret to some people, but inside the ecosystem, we're not. So.
Thank you. Other questions for Kurt? Other discussion among committee members or anything else from staff? So we have a recommendation for funding of $25,000 each to MDC Iowa and EDC Inc. Would someone like to move approval of that?
I'll move approval. We send it to the full council.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Good time,
Appreciate
Albie.
it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
That's their report.
I always have staff time.
Go for it.
As an agenda item.
Yeah.
But I don't have anything to report.
I'll give you my.
Does that mean we have committee time, which also doesn't have anything? Well, I just had one kind of discussion for us. I had posed a question to Wendy via email with these particular, I don't know if grants is the right word, but these particular funding opportunities, how they were selected or what criteria there would be to kind of, be, especially
The
hearing you
ones.
articulate and from kind of the opportunity then into community development and what that might look like. So, I don't know if Wendy, you just want to enlighten us a little bit on what that is or how, in my mind, it also was in that holistic question of what are we looking at when we're funding from other departments or other sources in the context of ARPA and all of that.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask Jeff to jump in. I think I would start out by saying that this funding has always has grown out of an organic process that I'd say probably started with the arts organizations years and years and years ago, who said, hey, we do this great thing for the community. It is definitely on a branch of the economic development tree, but we need some funding to support us. And so we heard those cases, basically, and began funding those, pretty much those same organizations that you listened to last month. And also then later, Kurt Nelson's organization approached us with the same kind of thing that he did today. And we said, as so long as it's supporting economic development in Iowa City by supporting Iowa City businesses, then that probably makes some sense. Then Tracy came to us a couple of years ago and said, I really want to focus on BIPOC-owned business and growing opportunities for underserved, underrepresented populations here. And he sought us out, and we said, that sounds like a worthwhile thing. He had a plan, cohort ready. He had materials from an established program that had been developed in Waterloo, and he was funded for those first couple of years out of a line called our Opportunity Funds. But now that it's a going concern, we wanted to get him sort of in this same line, I guess you could call it, that other organizations, these that you've been used to now, have come to us through, I guess. We haven't ever put out a call, and I think I made note of the fact that we haven't made it competitive, as Cedar Rapids recently has, and there are stories to go with that, I guess, too. Because I don't know if there is a because on this, but there's a limited size of pie, and there are actual direct dollar needs organizations need. And if we were to split that pie into as many pieces as organizations who would come to the table, I think we might risk underfunding some of the organizations that we've seen here. And I'll stop there and see if Jeff wants to
Yeah, maybe I'll layer onto that a little bit. That was good. I think economic development here in Iowa City and in the south end of the corridor is largely outsourced by the municipalities, and that's not the only model that exists. And Wendy was alluding to the Lynn County situation, which is a little bit different. So we have one economic development staff person, Wendy, who also has a number of other duties, but largely a lot of our economic development efforts is funded through and carried out by ICAD. Right, and so we contribute funding, so do the other municipalities, so does the county, with the idea that we're all working in the same space here. If we pool our money together, we can go a lot farther. And I think that's true. If you look at our ICAD investment, which I know was not on the agenda today, but is funded out of our economic development budget, I think that's $80,000 a year. Approximately, and you look at that team that we leverage because of that. And I think when the EDC came to us, however many years, 6-7 years ago, it was the same notion. We saw agreement in the region. We had other funders, in this case Cedar Rapids at the time, later Coralville and North Liberty joined, come to us and say, boy, I think we all could be investing in this. And it's not necessarily every year going to just impact Iowa City or Lynn County or Coralville, but we're all going to be better off because of smaller investments, leveraging a bigger staff pool and a bigger assistance pool. When it came to looking at MCD Iowa, that was more of a need that the Iowa City Council prioritized that wasn't necessarily being prioritized around the region. So that's when we take some of those discretionary dollars. Wendy referred to it as the Opportunity Fund. Every year we have discretionary economic development dollars that we look to go out and utilize in a way that align with our council's strategic priorities and our missions. In spaces that maybe the other areas aren't as focused or aren't as targeted. So the BIPOC Business Accelerator is a great idea. That's been a priority of council for a couple of years. We were able to network with Tracy John and learn that he had shared goals. He couldn't get it off the ground because of lack of funding, so we felt that was a good use of those funds. We'll continue to do that. We oftentimes will craft grant programs centered around those same city council objectives. Like last year's targeted small business grants were launched because of that. Again, trying to go above and beyond where the regional efforts not really focused at the time. As far as I'm aware, there's not another kind of regional group out there that is getting funded by other municipalities that we would bring forward, like an EDC or an ICAD. However, there may be other folks that are supporting businesses, nonprofits or private organizations that are supporting businesses, and it's kind of I guess our job is to continue to look for those opportunities, evaluate those, and bring those to you. We could certainly do a competitive call, but as Wendy said, we might get to a situation in which you're looking at kind of risking underfunding some of those organizations, and can we really carry them out? Like, the $25,000 for the MCD Iowa. I think Tracy alluded to, that's great now, that's serving the purpose now. That may not be enough going forward to continue something like this. So we just want to be careful with that. I would suggest and make the argument that if you're seeing a need, if you're hearing a need from constituents that is not being filled in the economic development space, really share that with us and allow us to, what we'll pretty much always do is explore that with the regional group first and see if there's an opportunity to collaborate. And if those resources just aren't there, or that alignment's not there, then we'll go out and we'll look for those opportunities like we did with MCD Iowa.
Yeah, I had just, and I sent Wendy a link to a new organization that I just learned about that was supporting really Latina women starting businesses, and I can talk with Andre, right, kind of about what he was doing in supporting people getting into that industry. So those were just things that had come into my mind of, well, I don't know how this is selected. So that was very helpful.
Those are helpful, and I'd love to. We can certainly connect with the organization that you sent to Wendy. And we've supported some of Andre's efforts in the past when he's done fashion shows downtown and things like that. We've been sponsors. We're talking about the operating budget. The other big opportunity here is obviously the ARPA funds, in which we're going to be crafting a program really targeting BIPOC and underserved businesses. So that'll be another opportunity, and that probably will be some type of competitive process because they are one-time funds, whereas with these we're looking at more annual operating funds where we might have that competitive process. Not sure what that looks like yet, but we're going down that path.
Very helpful, thank you. Incredibly helpful.
Any other business?
Not for me.
Nothing.
I would move to adjourn. Oh, I'm sorry, Megan, did
No,
you
I
have
was
something?
just going to say, it's been only 2 meetings, and yet I so relished coming to these because it's really seeing how the city itself is leveraging its relationships with entities where that's their gig, right? And so it just is wonderful to be a part of this, to learn more and to see just how much the city is committed to this by helping the entities where that is their main vision and the work that they do. So I just appreciate being on the committee.
Good stuff.
Stars in my eyes.
Okay, I'll move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Done.
I'll second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. None are opposed. All right, we are adjourned.